comics are often ruled by capes. Can't really escape them, honestly. I mean, sure, there's a lot of amazing indie comics. There are great companies like Image that are championing all sorts of works, various genres and topics like horror and mystery and crime and thrillers and all that fun stuff. But if you go to your local comic book shop, I'm sure you'll probably see more oftentimes than not a bunch of superhero stuff. But what about supervillain comics? There are some here and there that sort of explain the tragic backstories and the origins of evil, like Doc Ock Year 1, an amazing story by Zeb Wells. We just got a comic series from Marvel as a revival from a classic 70s series called Bring On the Bad Guys, which sort of dives into these little stories of different villains from Green Goblin to Red Skull. But what about a story about a real stone-cold villain, some guy caught up in this web of villainy and evil that maybe finds some redemption, some renewal? Well, look no further than Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips' Incognito. So if you're not familiar with Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, they're perhaps one of the most talented duos in comics right now. They work primarily with Image Comics, although they of course have worked in the past with other comics too. Like of course Ed Brubaker did an amazing Daredevil run back in the day. Of course he was responsible for Captain America Winter Soldier. And Sean Phillips even also did the art for Marvel Zombies. The duo have been working together for decades now. They've released so many iconic stories, like, of course, as we've talked about on the channel in the past, Criminal. They also did, of course, well, Incognito, naturally. Kill or Be Killed, Fatale. They have such a wide variety of just amazing, fantastic work. Some of the best that I've read in the comic industry, honestly. And Incognito is no exception. It follows the story of this guy named Zach Overkill. Yes, it's very comic booky to its benefit, which I think is great. It still manages to get that Ed Brubaker grit, but also really has some fun with some comic book tropes, and especially some sort of pulp hero tropes, which we'll get to in just a second. But the idea is that Zach Overkill is a former villain. He was a ruthless guy that had no heart. He was working with his brother, who their powers are sort of connected and everything. Like sometimes the power flows to his brother, other times it flows to him. They work together and everything. They feel each other's experiences and everything like that. So even when they're separated, they can still sort of like feel that. That's sort of like, you know, classic twin telepathy type thing. But now he's been flipped and he's in witness protection program, which means that he has to live an ordinary life. And, well, the ordinary life for a supervillain is kind of boring. He misses, you know, all the fun and excitement, you know, the blast and the fights and, you know, the money, of course, too. Now he's working a boring office job and he just feels like he was meant to do more and he feels trapped in this world of capitalism. But as it turns out, he's been taking these things that the government has been giving him to, you know, keep his powers in check. Because, I mean, he could just, like, say, like, oh, yeah, I'm just living a normal life and everything. In reality, you know, he's using his powers every night or whatever. But, as it turns out, doing drugs releases him, so he's able to bypass these suppressors and doesn't exactly do crime anymore. No, he's more interested in stopping crime. Oh, wait, didn't you say this was a villain story? It is, yes, but I said once again that it's about renewal and redemption, but he's not doing these heroic things for good reasons. I mean, he is still saving people, of course, but he still has this sort of snide attitude about it. He's like, oh, these victims are so stupid, man. He's in it because he is the strongest and most powerful guy ever, and he wants to prove it. It's this interesting arc of what if a supervillain tried to be a hero, but they didn't quite understand the heroics of it. It isn't about self-sacrifice, it's about proving himself, and, of course, getting a sick joy out of it. Oh, but the guy he flipped on is pretty mad about it. He really does not like this guy. He knows exactly who flipped on him and who got him locked up in prison, and boy does he want revenge. So you get to see all sorts of fun and cool, exciting fights throughout this. I mean, of course, obviously the artwork by Sean Phillips is amazing, very kinetic, and it really just comes in when it needs to come in. You know, Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips work together so well because Ed Brubaker knows when the art really needs to do the heavy lifting and when the writing needs to sort of step in a little more too. That the art is always fantastic, but sometimes he just lets the art sort of speak for itself, which I think is a very beautiful thing. Zach Overkill starts off as this villain that's in hiding, and eventually he sort of like goes down this arc of sort of trying to understand and learn what exactly it means to be a hero. And he's being thrust in this sort of grand conspiracy and everything like that. Turns out that there's some pretty strange things going on with him and his brother. And it may lead to him being set up for something pretty nefarious. One of the coolest aspects about this particular comic, I think, is that it sort of takes place in its own world. It feels like it's very lived in. It almost feels like Invincible. It has like so many interesting characters to get introduced, a lot of villains and stuff like that. Like there's this person that can shoot fire out of their mouth and everything, and like, you know, you've got this woman that doesn't age, like she stays like 16 for like forever and everything like that, and she's like, you know, this super cool badass lady and stuff like that. So it's really cool. It's a very lived in world, but it's a world that could have easily been like transitioned and made into like a long-spanning comic series, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. It just really gets the job done. It tells the story it wants to tell. It does a sequel, and it's like, all right, we're done. That restraint is pretty admirable to me, honestly. If you're not familiar with some of Ed Brubaker's work, he likes to sort of deconstruct and play with these tropes and everything, and sometimes just sort of run with them. You can definitely see this in his work in Criminal, where he sort of dissects a lot of these classic crime tropes and everything from crime novels and movies and stuff like that. In this case, he's sort of doing that with comics too. He's sort of looking at, like, you know, what makes a hero and everything, and sort of, you know, having fun with all these, like, very, you know, over-the-top comic booky type things. Like, I mean, Zach Overkill, I mean, you know, that's a pretty comic booky name when we tell you. And there's a lot of other ones, too. There's, like, Dr. Zeppelin and stuff like that. You know, it's very, like, classic pulp sort of adventure, heroics type stuff like that, and some of the imagery of really sort of hits on that too, with sort of the grandiose, like, sort of style of it and everything. So it really is just, in one way it's a love letter to comics, in another way it's just such a fun and creative story. There's also another story like this too by Ed Brubaker as well, called Sleeper, where it's sort of vice versa. It's sort of the dark mirror reflection of this story, where a superhero has to pretend to be a supervillain. So that's also cool too. If you want to check that out as well, go ahead. So that was Incognito. If you've read it, let me know what you think, and if you go off and read it, feel free to come back and tell me about your experience. I think it is an amazing book. It really shows why Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips are super revered. And thank you for watching too. And not to worry as well, we will be covering Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips even more. I've got a big video planned for 2026 where we talk about the entirety of Criminal. That's going to be fun. I'll see you all soon.